Evening. We left off last week with children, I seem to recall. We were talking about best things that we can do in the world, and one of my point was that one of the best things we can do is raise good people, have good kids. And you had a point about needing to go through the overpopulation issue in relationship to that, which I'm
Hmm.
reluctant to do, but I can see that it's important.
In a way that would convince my past self, I was arguing.
Yes, yes. So if you And the other side of this, I think, that needs to be tackled is the effects of childhood trauma, trauma in general, but childhood trauma particularly on adult personalities and our tendencies and impulses, and trying to address that and work through that as being another important thing for the world. And if that is something that is a past version of you has an objection to, then it's something worth discussing for that reason as well. It ties in quite nicely.
I'm not so
Uh,
sure that I have an objection to that. I don't have a clear enough conception of it to object to it. So we'll tackle that one later.
no, I mean, when you say that 10 years ago you has an issue with the population thing, and thus you want to discuss it.
Oh, about the
I'm just
population, yes.
making, yes,
Yeah.
yes,
About
yes.
childhood trauma.
I'm just, I know, but I'm making a reference to
Hmm.
parts of us from the past that we still carry with us having something to say.
Yes.
That's how it
And carrying lessons that are
niggled
worth
in.
remembering.
Yes. Or the fact that past parts of ourselves are still very much with us, and that we have to to deal with and answer to them in quite a lot of ways.
Hmm. Yeah. So
So,
population.
okay, we want to start there.
Sounds like a good
That's
one.
fair
Let's
enough.
dive into some controversy.
Yes, I still hate this conversation, but it
Shall,
needs to be done.
shall I play the side of the argument of the population is too high for the bouncing
Well,
off of the
you
conversation to start.
you said that a
Layout.
past version of you had some points to say about that. So why don't you let that
Hmm.
part come up, inhabit it as much as you can, and voice them,
Yeah.
and we'll go from there.
Trying to make it not precise to my view, because my view is rather idiosyncratic and I want this to be useful to more people than just me. Um,
Mm.
the idea that there are too many people on the planet, I think it's a multi-sourced feeling as much as a intellectual argument. So there's the idea that there's a finite carrying capacity, which is intellectually appealing because it's a simple idea that makes sense in our everyday experience that you can only fit so many cows on a pasture, you can only fit so many humans on a planet. Okay, that makes sense. Um, the exact limit there and the manner of lifestyle that that would entail is very complicated. Um, and then the way that the idea that there is an upper limit that we are bumping into plays out and the arguments within it, um, from the less helpful perspectives, I would say, it comes out as we need to tell the poor what to do and stop them having kids and stop them developing industrially, and that's never appealed to me, but I think that a lot of people latch onto that in, on the positive side, despair and desperation, and on the negative side, haughtiness and arrogance. Um, but there are a couple of key tenets to it. The idea that we are near the carrying capacity limit, and on the opposite side of it, well, then what are you going to do, and what is morally right here? Um,
Okay. I feel like I need to interject.
yes, yes, please do. I was
You,
looking forward to this.
you started that off with a statement of um, relating it to cows in a pasture, that there's a certain that it makes sense. It's a simple idea and easy to understand that there's a certain level of this. And you made a comment about emotional sources charging this, and then it's an easy thing to understand intellectually.
Mm.
But then you went forward from that point, assuming that it's true,
I'm laying out the
just
argument
because
as
it's
I
easy to
believed
understand.
it a few years ago, and as I think many people believe it today. My view now is
Okay.
more nuanced, but I'm trying to start that as a starting point for the discussion.
Okay. So from my point of view with this conversation, that's the point that needs to be contended.
Mm.
It it can't be a definition in terms of how much or what do you do when you get to. No, as far as I'm concerned, the idea that there is a finite limit, that there is a carrying capacity of the planet and that it cannot be exceeded, I have issue with that in general. I can understand how that seems almost absurd.
Mm. Would it
So
be?
I'll take it a step back from that.
Mm.
Okay, we can assume, okay, there is some magical number. Why do we in our modern world think that we could possibly know what that number is?
Short version, arrogance or assumption that the experts can know.
Hmm. Well, yes. And it's always a model that doesn't put in any development of technology. It's always based upon where we are now without some form of radical leap.
Now, I'm much more of a techno pessimist than you, but I come to a vaguely similar conclusion to you in this area from a different route
Mm.
and in a different manner. So I agree that we have seen a massive increase in the ability to produce food through fertilizer and the technical progress that led to that, the Green Revolution, where large areas of land that were otherwise relatively infertile are brought into food production by the application of fertilizers. It's like hydroponics, but in a sand-like growth medium, otherwise known as dirt, which doesn't really qualify for the term soil to my mind, that being a much more living medium. Um, that has definitely taken place and forestalled the famines that were feared previously. I don't have the faith that that can occur again, or that progress can necessarily be held into the future, but that remains to be seen. I do think that there are systems of agriculture which can be more productive than modern industrial agriculture, but they are very, very different systems, and changing from one to the other is absolutely not an overnight thing. It would be a decade-long process for a country, and
Mm.
Sri Lanka tried to do
Assuming
it
it's
immediately.
assuming that it's done by fiat, even
Mm,
that may even be a much longer process if it's done gradually, say through the market.
yes. Um, you would need to have individuals trying and failing on one farm, another farm, and then a similar level of intensive study as has gone into modern agriculture, going into the alternative systems to develop them. There are the varieties of organic agriculture, various forms of far denser, more labor intensive, but also more productive agriculture, which would also depend on population dynamics and the amount of the population that would be happy to work in that environment to produce the food. We are very, very good at modern industrial agriculture, and sure, you can point out the fact that many forms of it these days decimate soil life and so on. But if you are taking the chemical fertilizers and converting them into food to feed people, it works very, very well. And we want to feed the people. We don't want anyone starving, so we can't drop what we don't like just because we don't like it. We need to feed the people. That needs to be a first priority. And
We should tell Europe that.
yeah, it's just cutting off natural gas and saying, oh, we can stop all natural gas usage. No, you can't stop natural gas for fertilizer. There is no alternative. You need it to provide the hydrogen that goes onto the methane, sorry, off the methane, onto the ammonia through the Fischer process. You need it for the chemistry. It's not just energy. You can't make um, solar powered
Yeah. Well,
factories
it's
to make.
not
Yeah.
just energy fuel, it's the fertilizer itself and
Mm,
the animals themselves and the farm equipment themselves that they're also trying to crack down on,
mm,
which is brilliant.
yeah.
Fertilizer is not really being exported anymore from the countries that produce it, and they're
Mm.
closing down a lot of the factories. So
And
I
when
certainly have a lot of anxiety about like literal global famines related to terrible policies of our current governments.
when I talk about my techno pessimism and my concern for the future, that is what it looks like.
Mm,
When I talk about
yeah,
the population being
I
very
see
high,
that. I
it's
see that as
high,
a
but
result of mismanagement, not as a result of an inherent limitation to technology or human ability and ingenuity.
I think that we need to make a distinction there that there's the upper limit that can be achieved, and there's the most that is likely to be constantly maintained. Because you don't want to go out on the edge where you can stand, but every now and again, say if you're out a long way along a tree branch, you can sit there, but then a wind blows and you get knocked off. It's like you don't go out that far. You
Mm,
go to where you know you can hang on if a breeze picks up or a storm comes
okay,
through.
I think we're going to very quickly wander into what makes a good society here if we're not careful.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
Because I think we either have to go on one or another assumption, and that's either we assume that the society in which, or societies in which the world is operating under are functional or where they're not, because then our calculation is going to be very different.
And I think this is a value difference between us, a conception of the world difference between us that we're not going to be able to agree or disagree. The bit that,
What
um,
difference?
oh, in
Sorry.
the sense of, sorry, my mind ran ahead to the next thing I was thinking of. Um, whether to say this is what we can achieve together versus me saying this is what we'll probably be able to maintain in the face of adversity and unlikely circumstances into the future. So, more conservative, pessimistic, safe option rather than. Uh,
Right.
yeah, and so I like to
Okay.
have more of a safety margin with regards to
So
how many people.
for that point,
Mm,
for that point, in my eyes, if you're going to organize a society either towards trying to hit the best we can achieve, which would be my view, or being conservative and safe, which is yours, I think either way, you need to have a functioning society in order to retool things to aim at either one.
yes.
And I think if you have a functioning society that can functionally aim and reshift its systems, its economy, its culture towards being more, conservative and sustainable in the way that you think, you could just as easily aim it at maximal production and maximal flourishing. In
Yes.
my eyes, if you have a society that is functional enough to go either way, then you want to go for the one that has the bigger reward, that can have a runaway positive effect. And if things are not good in the society, then individuals going towards the um, collapse survivable systems will be the safeguards. But if the society itself is sort of corrupt and cannot lead in either direction, then we're sort of stuck either way.
Mm. The
That's
society
that's the way I look
has
at that.
the society has dementia,
Yeah, yeah. If
which
we can't lead
that
ourselves to a
seems very
positive
apt.
vision, we can't lead it towards a um, fail-safe vision either. Like you're not going to get either.
Mm.
In which case, it's left up to the individuals to do so on their own, which many are doing.
So bringing it down to the individual scale, because we can talk about what it might be best for a society as a whole to do, um, but society's made of individuals, and we need to bring this to the decisions that individuals make. And the biggest issue that, or one of the big issues that we can see in the world today is the idea of having kids being a terrible crime. And on that
Mm,
point, I think I agree with you that that is wrong, that having kids in the current society, current arrangement is a net good, which among many groups of people would be a very controversial statement. And so I want to tackle it carefully.
okay, so I feel like we've come full circle right back to the start now, which is good because we sort of covered all of the fringes, and now we can go right at the point, which is the story behind that is that we've got too many people, there's not enough to go around, and that the only way to make sure that things don't collapse is to shrink the population so that there's more to go around per person. Would I be right in saying that that's the way that 10-year-old you was, not 10-year-old, but 10 years ago you were thinking about things?
Yep, yeah, you've covered up your microphone, so it's gone all muffled.
Apologies, it's just sitting right here,
Yeah, it
right
must
in
have
front of
flipped
my
over
face.
and
So,
faced towards your shirt, but um,
okay,
yes,
so
yes, basically yes. 10 year ago me.
yeah, that's the thing I disagree with quite strongly. It's sort of the fixed pie thing that there are X number of resources and Y number of people, so it's X divided by Y. So as Y grows, everyone has less because it's X divided by Y. But the way I see it, this is obviously a crude mathematical example. It's not really what it is, but it's almost like X to the power of Y divided by Y. That makes sense? That
Hmm.
the more people we have, the more efficiently we can use resources and create new ones. You can say that we can't create new resources, but that's what energy is. Transformational, I suppose.
What energy is.
Well, okay, it's a compounding effect. Not
Hmm.
creating. Well, it is creating new resources. If you take one part resource and turn it into effectively 50 parts of resource on the outset, then that's 40 new, 49 new effective units of resources. I'm being very crude about this, but my point is that the more people we have in a system, the more minds we have working on the problem, the more ingenious things that we can come up with to solve our problems and make things better. Like fertilizers, as you mentioned, which increase food output by a lot, like the practices of modern farming. Like when you mentioned your point about how many cows you have on a pasture can only you can only support X number of cows per pasture. It's like, well, that depends on how you feed the pasture to them. Like, I do this every week. If you just throw 100 cows in a pasture, yeah, they'll eat it and then they'll be hungry. But half the grass is destroyed because they're walking on it or they're shitting on it or they're lying on it or other kinds of things. And there's a way to do things more efficiently to actually get more out of the same amount of food for the cows. Again, a crude example, but my point is always that if more mouths to feed were less valuable than the food that fed them, then we would never have more people to grow our society. We wouldn't be here if we were less valuable than the food we consumed. We have to be able to contribute something back. We have to be able to create new things. Otherwise, why would our tribal ancestors have kept us around?
I think
People say,
I partly
so, no,
agree.
okay, I'll go.
I've recently adjusted my view with regards to the shrinking pie. I still think finite pie, but I think limited ability to mine it, if that makes sense. Limited by the number of people. And the pie regrows renewable resources and such. So as you're saying with the pasture, if you overgraze the pasture, it gets depleted.
Mm,
Um, but at the same time, if you have 10 cows on 1,000 acres, then 1,000 acres, most of which goes to gorse because you don't have enough ability to maintain it, then the more cows you have to trample down the gorse, the more pasture you get. So I think
yeah,
that there's, when we're expanding into new areas and new uh, conceptual areas, so when we find a new way to um, a new resource to mine or a new way to extract energy or something like that, then the more we put in, the more we get out. I still see us as, I still see too much population as being a problem, but I don't see it as a problem that we have at the moment in the same way, as in I feel like that problem has solved itself, which is why I'm not concerned about having a child.
mm.
And I see
But
the decline in population as socially traumatic. And so at the moment,
that's an understatement,
yeah.
that one.
So assuming that dodging the bullet of, even if we draw back from the idea of whether or not overpopulation is bad, if we leave that as an unknown, saying that dodging that bullet by having the population crash down is going to solve the problem is missing the point of there's another big problem here. And that's why
Yeah,
I,
a way worse problem by all measures.
it's not one that humans haven't faced before, but it's certainly hard. It's four grandparents and two parents and one child, and the grandparents all retire, and the parents are getting on a bit, and the one child's there looking at all their relatives thinking, how the hell can I support them? Because
Hmm.
every retired person needs to have enough spare labor in the labor force to support them. And like Japan's been trying
Yeah,
to do it with robots, but
they need food.
yeah, you
Yeah, that's
need,
why assisted suicides come into law everywhere.
which is dark as
It's,
hell.
yeah, yeah, it's terrible. Something like 4% of Canadian deaths now are assisted suicide.
What will that look like in 100 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be grim. And it's almost all old women living in a flat alone with no one who loves them or cares about them at all because they never had kids. because the men are all dead anyway because they die earlier.
Mm. Yeah, because of course
It's a dark world.
that's where that one person with the four grandparents and two parents ends up in a few decades. Then the
Yeah.
grandparents die, and then their parents die, and then they're there with no
Well, that
kids.
comes back to all the brainwashing lies that we've been telling young women of not having families, and well, your life will be so much better if you live hedonistically, impulsively forever.
It may be because the YouTube
But
algorithms
then, well,
recategorized me, but I've been seeing a lot of videos of women saying, I hate the things that feminism lied to me about.
I don't think it's the algorithm being changed. I think that's actually a bit of a awakening at the moment.
Hmm.
Like it's trending everywhere. Finally, people are getting fed up with this shit and speaking out, which
Yeah.
is like, thank God, because if that doesn't change, we're all dead. Entire society's gone. And that's we're starting to wander into the this is done on purpose by certain people who are trying to shape the world in a certain way. I don't want to go down that one today, but as a hint for another day, this isn't accidental. Um, I think a lot of people that are truly concerned about, like, oh, I don't want to bring a child into this horrible world. I don't think it's overpopulation per se, even though that's often the thing touted.
Hmm.
I think it's either their own pain and trauma, or it's the more fundamental, human beings pollute the planet, therefore human beings bad kind of thinking.
Hmm.
Not so much like, 10 billion of us is bad, but 5 billion's okay. It's more that, one of us is too many kind of philosophy,
Hmm. The attitude
which,
of an unspoilt natural vista is worth any amount of human suffering. It's like, no,
yeah. Yeah, that the world would be better without us here.
one is not, any one thing is not worth infinite. Like, there is a limit to that. And the limit goes both ways, though. Like, wild wilderness has a value, human welfare
Oh,
has
yeah.
a value, and both of those count, but neither one is zero.
And it's also sort of foolish if you think about it for a thing, because it's always the case of we're changing the environment. That's horrible. The environment should never change. And you just sort of look at that for half a second and go, the environment should never change. It's like, bro, it changes all the time. And it's not some big natural cosmic cycle that repeats and is in perfect harmony and flow. It's like this is a chaotic system. Species rise and fall and die and evolve and change.
It's a
And
di
so does the weather and the environment. It's not a static system.
it's an utterly
It's not a
dynamic
closed loop.
system. And it
Mm, it's generative.
just like our immune systems, it is so integrated into that chaos that it needs that chaos. Like, there are, of course, outliers to it where they escaped certain forms of the chaos for a while, and islands that were isolated for 1 million years and developed odd wildlife that's helpless against the wildlife of the continent, the large continents where um, you had more evolutionary experimentation to come up with ways around defenses or lack thereof. So, flightless birds living on islands are a prime example. No predators, why bother flying? Yeah, elsewhere they picked up predators, and there just wasn't enough room to do enough experiments for those forms to evolve on islands. But
Yeah.
predators getting to islands, you're getting a land bridge, then you have predators come along, you have a particularly wild storm kicks some seeds over of a plant that disrupts the natural order in the new place. It's like, yeah, that happens. But it's normal. that is the process of nature itself. That is, it could be said that we have accelerated that a millionfold by our motion around the planet. But trying to reduce that to
Accelerated.
zero is wrong. It's like the New Zealand
Well, we
environment
can
will adapt to
influence it.
pine trees.
But yeah, we can influence the environment. And if, we want to be doing this right, it's not, oh, we can't influence it at all. It needs to be perfect without us. It's how do we influence it in such a way that the planet's better off?
Mm,
And that's not exactly the set of species that existed, 100 years ago is better off. It's life in totality.
mm.
Because you can't optimize the planet for a species that's niche to some weird area in the corner with like no population. It's kind of dumb. It needs to be something that's more general than that. I don't think we'll get very far trying to convince people logically with this. The most effective methods I've seen of people to sort of change their thinking on this is it's like the techno optimist view, which I've sort of put before, of like, you know, we went from like half of or 500 million or something to 8 billion or whatever, and starvation's gone nothing but down. Everyone's unbelievably rich and technologically advanced. We're in the best state ever with like no disease, and we have enough food to feed everyone on the planet like a couple times over. And it's just like political barriers that are stopping that, really. And we're producing more and more food every year and wealth, and everyone's coming out of poverty and getting electricity and internet access, and it's like it's all great, all of that. And then there's technologies we haven't even discovered yet that's going to change everything. There's satellite internet, there's fusion energy, or there's nuclear energy in general. There's all kinds of stuff, and that's great. But the other side of this is simply, I found that's really helpful to convince people who are of the set, particularly women. I found this one's hilarious. The women who are very like, oh, I don't know if I shouldn't have a kid. It's dangerous to the planet or whatever. I always ask them, who told you that and why? We get these messages from our governments and our cultural leaders saying, you shouldn't have children, you should, eat less and be more conservative and not politically, of course, but resourcefully. And you shouldn't try and impact the world as much as you can, and having kids is a bad thing. And oh, by the way, we're going to import a whole bunch of people into your country at the same time. And I often find that if you point that out to women in particular, they sort of have a wee fit. Either they go into the full, ideological defense, or they go, "Hold on, what? I'm being told not to have kids, and that being proud of, my cultural history is bad, but at the same time, more and more people should immigrate to the country. Like, you can't have it both ways." And no one ever says this about African countries. We're not going over there and proclaiming very loudly to all of them, "Hey, you should not have kids anymore." It's only here.
Because they'd laugh and throw a rock at you.
Yeah. Well, they're some of the happiest people on the planet, regardless of how poor they are.
Mm.
But that's not also why. It's not. Which I don't want to touch on too much in this, because I think we should make it to a separate thing. But as far as I'm concerned, that there is something very dangerous there in relation to the Dutch farmers, in relationship to the immigration issue, in relationship to the environmental issue, in relationship to totalitarian control that seems to be emerging everywhere.
I'm just
It's a
thinking.
very kulaki kind of setup
Mm.
of replace the part of the population that's connected with the ground, so they don't have any cultural identity, and then they're divided, and then you can conquer them.
It
Um,
feels like a failing strategy. I don't feel I don't find myself afraid that they will succeed because they are too disconnected from reality.
What, the people with their fingers on the power buttons?
Yeah.
I hope you're right. I mean, we could do that. We've sort of gone down this path. We could do that today if you want.
I wanted
I want
to
to touch on trauma in general,
yeah.
sort of
Before
leading
we
all the
go on
way
to
around to it.
that, the argument in favor of being a human that you were putting forward, that doesn't move me much, but I have my own one that moves me that I'd like to put forward.
Go for it.
The best summation of it that I saw, the soundbite version, was "We are the weeds that can heal the earth." Um, if you,
Stewards.
yeah, if you think of a weed in your garden, it's disruptive and a pain and bad, right? And that's a conception of how our society is acting in the world for those who
Mm,
see the harm we are causing. And so that, for me, has in the past and to a degree still causes guilt and pain in the sense of just seeing the destruction um, on a very visceral level. But the idea that we can be as positive a force in the world as we see our society being negative in its impact. And this applies on an individual and a societal level that in your individual action, think of the worst way you've ever screwed up. Now I propose you can make things as much better, you can be as much a force for good as your failure was a force for bad.
mm.
You are you have potential in every action, and that the power of that potential is terrifying because like butterfly effect you see in time travel stories, we don't know what will happen. The story is about accidentally stepping on a butterfly and it causes a storm or lack of storm or whatever. Okay, you don't know what will happen. How do you find out what will happen when you act? You act carefully and watch. And you can find that by floundering around and watching what happens and thinking about it and deciding where you want to go, making the determination that you want to follow the glimmers of light. Like, that may be, I feel like I need to start a garden, to do something, to have something to do with some growth of life as opposed to just death.
Oh, actually, that's an interesting thought. I feel like I've done my rant on that specific topic on this before.
Mm,
I don't remember. I'm pretty sure I did, but I just sort of had a bit of an intuition.
mm,
We're talking about individual action and choice, in that if we were to be conscious of every moment in our life and the decision tree coming out from that, how much of an impact we could have on the world individually if we dedicated ourselves to being good. And
mm.
I'm wondering if there is something in the idea when people say, I don't want to have kids. The world's so bad, and it's going to be make the world worse if I bring a child into this world, which I can't get. Or they couch it as, I don't want to bring the child into this world because it's an innocent child that'll be corrupted and broken by the world. I think having children is like a compounding effect on your choices. Like if you're a good person and you have children, then they're better than you, and they'll do better than you in the world. But if you're a bad person and you have children, then you'll hurt them and they'll do worse. Like a multiplication effect,
Yeah.
u squared. And I wonder if there's a part of their brain, people who are like this, who is saying, I don't do anything good on a day to day basis. You know, all I do is consume and watch stuff and eat bad food and talk shit and complain about the world. I don't actually do anything good. Like their subconscious knows this. They blame everyone else for it in the world, but really it's what they're doing on a day-to-day basis.
Strive to
And
be
then
who
they
you
say,
wish your child would be.
yeah, and then it's them doing the things that they complain about, you know, like oh, the sweatshops in China are so bad, and how do we allow people to do this? And let me tweet that from my iPhone that I were made by them. And I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to buy another one. I'm not going to
Hmm.
donate any money to help them. I'm not going to feed the poor. I'm just going to complain about things. I feel like there's a part of the subconscious that might be saying, maybe you shouldn't have kids. Like maybe you in particular, who's not doing any good in the world, maybe you shouldn't. There's some kind of reflection of like, I'm not good enough, perhaps there.
Yeah. I was just thinking about the path to bettering yourself. That there are various Groundhog Day type movies, and that's the archetypical one, where someone ends up in a time loop, reliving the same day, changing things to try and get the outcome they want. And we can't relive the same day, but we live many, many days. And if you
Mm.
watch, you can see the patterns, and like what you see is what you aim at. What you see, how you perceive the world, the opportunities to do things you see. Like, pick up a camera and start walking around looking for things to take a photo of, and you'll see beautiful things that are worth taking photos of. Because you have the camera and you have defined a goal is to find something beautiful to take a photo of. It could be a pretty flower that where you don't know what it's called, but it makes really nice patterns with its petals. Um, it could be the shape of the landscape as you're driving over a hill. It could be the ships scattered off the headland. As I was up the hill today, so I took some photos of these things, and um, but that moving out and with a goal and getting out your front door and then falling flat on your face and go back inside and I got out the front door. That's a something. Don't don't belittle yourself for not achieving more. Look at what you did and think,
Ah,
okay, I did that. I planted a seed and it died. I tried to grow some strawberries and they rotted. Here is information. Here is things to learn. Here is ways to improve. That has inestimable value. Like,
you have to be actually aiming up to achieve that.
yes, and you have to be searching for, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to be a
Mm,
person who I would be happy to send out into the world because your children
I'm
become,
not doing enough.
yeah. So it's like, okay, you're not
Yeah,
doing enough. Do something. It will be worth practically nothing, but do it. Do one thing. Like,
I think there's something really there that the modern people don't get. We all think we're the most virtuous people in the world because we believe this or that, and then we live out these corrupted lives, consuming and being wasteful and not contributing anything valuable to the community or to technological progress
and
other
feeling
than
guilty because they know in their
mm,
mind is not as pure as they profess. Like, forget
yes,
how screwed up your
yes,
head is. All of our heads are screwed up in some way. We've all got things that we wish we'd never done or that we're ashamed to have in our head. We've got intrusive thoughts that it's like the
I
idea
think
that could
it's
come through your head of, oh, I could punch someone or something like that. It's like, okay, you see the thought and it's like, oh, wow, I must be so messed up. It's like, okay, everyone has those. Get over it.
yeah,
Um, but what do you
yeah, that comes
do?
back to the trauma thing. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
I
like,
think yeah, I think okay,
mm,
I think I think it's an externalization of the subconscious. I think it's the collective unconscious.
mm,
Back to Jung. I know we haven't really got into that, but we act out such a pattern that is damaging in the West, that is damaging to the world, and we don't contribute anything back. Most Western people do this. And I think it's the collective unconscious, like, sort of being manifest, saying, hey, this is what we're doing. But the reason why people proclaim these catastrophic visions and say the things like, I'm not going to have kids because of the planet, is because they don't believe in the redemption. They don't believe an individual can make enough change in the world to make a difference. So one more individual is nothing more than another person who's going to do the same thing and just be like another grain of sand that's making the heap that's smothering the world. They don't accept the notion, and for good reason. They don't accept the notion that if you are awake and aware of your choices every day, that you can choose good or evil at every moment. And if you choose good at all moments, you will have a you have an impact on the world that is borderline religious, like a messiah kind of figure. That
And
you
that
could reshape the whole world,
and the
or you
start
could
of
go the other
that,
way and be pure evil.
the,
But
s- the
but
start of that is seeing that evil and
well, it's
first being
being
aware
aware of
of
the
it.
choice. It's being aware of the choice, and I think the average
Yeah.
Western person has purposefully said, "I'm not going to look. I'm not going to be aware of that choice. I'm just going to live in my little habits and do the things that feel right to me, and I'm not going to pay attention to the significance of my choices."
And we've shielded ourselves from the terror of our own responsibility by saying, "Oh, it's the evil corporations who are polluting, and
Yes.
they need to change." And it's like, are
Yeah,
they
I can't
going
do
to because
anything
you
about
shouted
it.
at them? Yeah,
I
it's like,
can't do anything about it. It's humanity as a whole. It's the big collective. It's not any one individual. And it absolves them of the guilt, but the guilt's still there because of the unconscious. So they put it on the world, and then they say like, "Oh well, human beings are nothing but these beings who are going about their daily activities and destroying the world." You're just describing yourself.
so does that make anyone
That's
feel
all
better?
they're doing. No,
Pushing off the
so then they don't
guilt.
have kids.
Yeah, but pushing off the guilt, saying, I feel guilty about this. This is their fault. It's like, okay, does that make you feel better? Well, sure, getting
Yeah,
angry can be cathartic and however you say that, and it can feel
that's
good
kind
to
of
be
amazing.
raging at the machine and such, and you can go
But
out with a group of
they'll
people and
never change anything in their own life. I've just sort of
mm.
realized that the description of the horrible things that are happening to the world because of the West, which is always the enemy, it's not the West, it's themselves. It's 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 always a self description of these, way too wealthy, usually Americans, who are living on their laptop, consuming, 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 spending money like crazy, not and then saying, "Oh well, I bought an electric car, so I'm the right person." It's those rural farmers are the bad people. It's always a denial of it's the denial of an individual's ability to change the world, which is exactly the reason why they won't have children, or why they say that some of them still do. Because if you don't believe that a new person in the world could actually change things for the better, then yeah, why would you? And nothing, and it's also the pure selfish, the idea that caring for anyone else is a horrible thing, which comes back to your YouTube trend algorithm showing you like women actually getting annoyed at the notion of, being entirely selfish and hedonistic is the greatest way to live.
Mm.
It's like actually caring for other people is sort of what makes you human, and that's kind of important.
I was just thinking that something that's helped me a lot, I've been through accident of circumstance and upbringing and my own tendencies, or possibly even hard won lessons. I can't remember precisely, but um, I want to be someone who becomes better. I don't want to
Mm.
be someone who was good, or at least the recent evolution of this perception that I want to find my flaws. Well, is someone who was good better, or is someone who is becoming better? At first, the person who was good will probably be better, but the person who is becoming better changes over time, learns from their mistakes, climbs, and every step that they take is fought for through the brambles of life with bare hands. And those
I
lessons are
think
hard won to build yourself better and burn away the parts of yourself that are causing the pain for you and others. And it's a screaming at the injustice in yourself and the world, and it's sacrifice. It's what would you sacrifice to be better? What would you
it's
sacrifice
being
to
humble.
get the woman of your dreams? What would you sacrifice? How much would you be willing to sacrifice for that? Would you sacrifice your social comfort? Would you sacrifice your um your usage of alcohol to some degree? No, giving up a habit is hard, but it's like, would you sacrifice going out to drink every night? Would you do it a little bit less? Would you sacrifice what is the thing you're pursuing worth? How can you climb a step forward, feeling around in the dark for the right direction and finding you've gone the wrong way? And that's a
It's being
very,
humble.
yeah.
I think
First, you've got to
not
realize you're
not
not
to go
awesome.
into the yeah, not to go into the metaphysical thing, but I think actually that believing in a higher power is actually a precondition for that. That I am not the greatest thing. There's something else that's greater. So I'm sort of lowly, and because of that, I can't be perfect. So I need to sort of like try and be better. And I don't mean like traditional religious Christian kind of sense because that's not who I am. But I think that you are that way because of your metaphysical beliefs. And I think a lot of the people in our world who are of the idea that like I am good the way I am, those people are bad because they're bad.
You need to
Are exactly the
accept.
kind of people that are like, no, there's nothing higher.
Yeah.
Like I'm just the greatest thing in the world.
I think you need to accept the way that you are now before you can change it. But accepting
Ex-
that you are who you
Except,
are, accept in the sense of I stop denying it.
yes, you need to be able to look at yourself.
Mm. And you won't get there all at
Okay,
once. You look at yourself and you see, yeah, I don't like that bit, and then
it's
you might work
interesting
on
that we've
improving
come
that.
back to this. It's interesting that we've come back to this because I think that I remember having a rather pointed and aggressive rant about the moments. This might have been before we started doing this conversation. This might have been the one of the old videos that I did back way back when.
Mm.
Perhaps I'll have to go through and see if I actually did it on this channel or not. And if not, then I might need to redo it. But the point of the unbelievable power that we have in every moment of every day and the choices between the worlds that could be one way or another, like the butterfly effect, but in every moment of every day. And that you need to be able to believe that you can do better and that things can be better in order for you to be optimistic enough to have children. And you also just have to not be a completely selfish bastard
Or to
because
believe that
otherwise, they're nothing but an inconvenience. You have to be able to put someone else first.
we can make the best of whatever the world is, because the world can get harsh. But like the word hope, if you trace it back, it used to mean determination to make the best of a bad lot. Like
I
life's
like
tough.
that.
That's what I've heard. But the idea of itself, even if I've got that root of the word wrong, Um, like the hope now is used so much as I hope my lottery number comes up. Well, you can't do anything about that. What are you going to do? It's like, or I still have hope, right? You still see the used that way sometimes. Like, do you have hope? I have hope. I will keep working on it. And often it's portrayed as just you're sitting there having hope. Well, sitting there having hope isn't going to do much. I have hope. I can do this, right? I have
Yeah.
determination. I have agency. I have something that I can do. And whatever
It's the
you
white pill.
do, you can make it better. Not by much, but every day you can make yourself a bit better. It's like, what can you do? What draws you? It's I talked about the meaning I found in life through working with my hands, and I got a more nuanced perception of it. It was at that time I was getting meaning from working with my hands, but I since worked out that the meaning for me doesn't come from so much any particular thing. I get the meaning from chasing the meaning. I chase the glimmers of light, knowing that the glimmers are not the source of the light, knowing that I'm feeling around in the dark, seeing a glimmer, reaching out for it, and that gives me some satisfaction that the light is meaning, and I'm reaching for that where I see that, trying to failing and falling into distractions and da da. But when I'm chasing that meaning, when I'm listening to a nice song or contemplating something or working with my hands or whatever it is that feels like forward progress towards the goal of being better. Oh, I'm just thinking about how um I heard about the way the reward system is structured in your brain that you define a goal, and then if you are anything that impedes you from approaching that goal triggers a negative emotional reaction. And anything that helps you move toward that goal or is evidence of your motion toward that goal triggers a positive emotional reaction. And I've defined moving toward meaning as my goal. I've defined getting better. No, yeah, moving toward meaning as my
Mm,
goal. And so every time I chase down a glimmer of light,
I think that's too reductionistic of a point of view on that.
yeah, it's not fully fleshed out. It's just a concept I had, but there's light in life. There's light and there's meaning. There's stuff out there, and
You need to have a positive vision to
mm,
have children.
yeah, yeah,
Pure and simple. There's no way around that. Like, if you're sitting around and you're having the, "Oh, I don't know, I shouldn't bring children into this horrible world." Like, okay, is the world so bad that it can never get better? And if that's the case, like, I don't know what to tell you. You're in such a dark place in your mind, and you should probably seek some help and maybe try and look at the other side of things, because I'd be more concerned about yourself and your mental thoughts right now than, you know, family. Because if you are in that mental state, then no, you shouldn't, because you need to get your shit together. Not that the world's so wrong. It's right. Come, it's always that ancient thing, isn't it? It's not the world. It's you. And if it is the world, well, you're fucked anyway, because you can't change that. I think when it comes down to it, if you don't have a positive vision for the future, then this conversation's sort of pointless. Like, we can try and convince you that things will go well, that we can give you a positive vision. But if you're hopelessly pessimistic or ideologically so, then you're stuck. and you'll never know the beauty and the excitement of bringing life into the world. And maybe you shouldn't, because the likelihood that you would actually be good for that child, that you would actually give them a good life in such a destructive mindset is not very high. And that leads into the topic that we were going to talk about today, which is the trauma that we all have experienced in our lives to greater or lesser degrees, and how that shapes our personality. So if you are out there and you have that thought of, I shouldn't bring children into this world, what I encourage you to do is to look at your childhood and to look at your life and to figure out what things there are causing you pain. You can say that it's your rational mind that's come to this conclusion, but I don't think it is. And we've given you lots of different rational arguments, and we've tried to be balanced and work our way through the systems of thought that people use to excuse or obscure this emotion. But I think when it comes down to it, this is pain and sorrow of the world in your soul. And that it's something that you have to go into yourself and work on. And I think because of that, we should leave this here. And when we pick up next week, we'll go right into how trauma affects us. We could be specific if you're feeling open enough to it and talk about some of the personal things that we struggle with and what kind of things are a result of trauma. I think rather terrifyingly that majority of our modern world and the majority of people's behaviors that are considered normal are not and are that way because of the trauma they suffered when they were growing up.
Being well adjusted to a sick world is no sign of health.
Yes, and it's very often not the world but the family home that's the cause of that problem,
Hmm.
or it's the symptom. It's like the biggest problem of humanity as far as I'm concerned. So if we want to make a positive world and a positive future, then we need children raised in a good way. And if you're not a stable person, if you haven't faced the traumas of your past, then maybe having children's not what we need.
I think
Because
another
more broken people is not helpful. Mm, wow. I mean, we've got this far by having people that are broken in such a way of workaholics that's produced all this technology, which is keeping us afloat, and without which we're going to fall pretty hard on our face. But I certainly will never encourage someone to have children simply and excuse the idea that they might damage them. God, it's such a complicated topic. I don't even know where I stand on that, which is probably why we need to talk through it, because I don't know.
We don't know, but I think the biggest thing that we're trying to encourage is awareness and attention, which awareness, waking up, and this thing that they're used enough in certain circles that they've become somewhat devoid of meaning. It's like what we're meaning, I think, is okay, if anyone's listening to this, where are you sitting, right? Or standing? What are you doing? Why are you doing that? Are you doing household chores? Are you relaxing by the computer after a hard day? Are you trying to work out what to do with your life? And then during your day, like, just think about it. Okay, I'm doing this now. Just recognizing that you're in a situation, that things are happening. Or when you take an action, recognize, okay, I just did this. I just lied to this person. What? Why did you lie? Or why did I lie? Why did you do that? I'm not even saying see those things and change them. I'm just saying aware. Like, don't just act and then forget and float through life in a daze. It's like, okay, a thing is happening here. An amazing thing called life. A terrible, terrifying, beautiful, painful, astonishing thing called life, which you can try and hide from or rage at or learn from and grow through. And there's something there that's so powerful that I can't articulate. There's something emotively powerful for me in that. And the idea that that by striving forward, we can do more, we can do something, we can work out something. And it starts from open your eyes and look. Why are you sitting the way you are? Are you all slouched over because you're focused on the computer? And is that why your back hurts? Hang on a minute. That's a point where being aware of something can possibly help make your life a bit better. Does your back hurt because of some medical issue that you need some help from a doctor? Or if you're in serious pain from that, I have great sympathy for you. Or is it possibly being made worse by slouching at the computer? Well, what would feel better to sit? Just, I wonder if sitting up straight that way or that way, or do I need to stand up and crack my back, or are my eyes hurting? Do I notice that I don't get a good sleep, or I, when watching the computer, I don't feel the sleepiness? And then I get off and it's like, oh, I should have gone to bed an hour ago. And, or you pull out your phone because you're feeling a little bit bored, and it's like, why did I pull out my phone? To stimulate myself just because I'm a little bit bored. Well, is it so precious? Is it going to make my life so much better? Or maybe just sit and watch your kid play for a bit if you have a kid. Or, okay, what happens if I just look out the window at the tree and breathe for 10 seconds? Okay, how did that feel? Just, it's that awareness of where you are and just sort of trying little experiments in your life to see, okay, how does this work? And what if I do this? And does this thing that I bought actually make me feel better? Or was it a waste? Am I drinking all my money away? And then, okay, well, what if I take a little bit of money and put it somewhere I can't reach it? Like, freeze it in a block of ice, take a little bit of cash out, freeze it in a block of ice before you go out drinking. And then you can use it to buy yourself something to eat the next day. And then maybe put it somewhere and just little practices of will of like you're aware I'm going to choose to move my hands to do this thing, and then I'm going to walk and do and just get on with life. But it's that choice of I'm going to choose to take this action by being aware and being aware of the present surroundings, like being present, another buzzwordy thing these days. It's like, okay, what does it mean? It means I'm my mind is in the present moment. It's not thinking about the plans in 3 weeks and the work I need to do tomorrow and the thing that someone said that was mean yesterday and so on. You're living in your head all the time. Like, breathe. Feel the breath go into your mouth and out of your mouth, and just look around you and then go back into the flow of life because you can't hold on to that state forever. But there's attention is the universal solvent of the mind, which that's a funny way to put it, but yeah.
And it's everything.
Yeah.
And your point of practicing, it is a practice. And it takes a very long time to become in the practice of it. I think you're right. You need to start practicing it and looking at what you did. And over time, you'll come to recognize the impulse before it happens. You get the awareness of, I'm tempted to lie about this before it comes. And then often you'll get the habit instinct which kicks in and says, oh, I'll get away with it. Something like that. You need to have the awareness of, I'm tempted to do a thing, or I want to do a thing, or I could do a thing. And then you need to make the conscious choice of, do I do this or do I not? But you need that awareness first.
And the awareness on its own is a victory. Even if you can't
It is.
change your actions at all, even if you
It is.
are just being aware of yourself being abusive
But
to someone you love.
there is a
Yeah.
second thing that is required as well to make a change in the world. And that is to believe that your choices matter.
Mm.
Because if you don't think anything matters, if you're, super atheist, pile of mass kind of atoms thought process, then just because I'm aware that I could lie to this person, why shouldn't I? If it is entirely meaningless, then your choices, your actions, they don't matter. And then you can do whatever you like. It gives you the ultimate escape from, well, from consequences. And I've struggled with this myself. First, being aware, getting around the habits that have been built through trauma in your life, and having that awareness of, oh, I'm tempted to do this thing. I'm tempted to buy this. I'm tempted to eat this. I'm tempted to lie and try and hide this. And then the second thing is, no, I can't actually just do this and get away with it. No, it actually does matter that this is going to be bad. Because for a long time I had the awareness, but I didn't believe that anything mattered. So it was like, well, what does it matter? The consequences of this. Nah, it doesn't matter. I'll just do it anyway. I don't care.
In one sense, that's where metaphysics comes in, because like science can tell you what will happen, but religion, in the very broad sense of the word, spiritual perception of the world, can tell you why you should do one thing. And I'm not saying God on high handing down commandments to live this way, don't eat pork, whatever. It's more that, yes, it matters.
You
And
need to believe in good.
yeah, there are so many ways to conceive the yes, it matters. There's it pains God when you do bad things. Like, that's not my personal one.
Yeah, not very good.
Yeah, for me, it's oh, I don't even have a good um enunciated version of it. I can't lay it out specifically, but like belief in reincarnation, that and of a form of karma as sort of a natural law of life, like the tide going in and out in a sense, like it's impersonal. It's like if you go up to the street and slap someone, they'll probably whack you back pretty hard. Like that's a result of an action. Your actions have results. And how far those results of your actions stretch is the question karma in its philosophical form tries to answer. But
Yeah.
yeah,
You almost
that's
have to
getting
take
deep.
it on faith that the things that I do that are tiny but wrong, and I know that are wrong, actually matter. And you can't accept that without believing that the world matters.
Isn't it worth trying to make the world you live in? Isn't it worth trying to make your life a little bit less bad?
Yeah, but then there's the arrogance problem of like, oh, I'll just get away with it. Oh, well, this one thing doesn't matter so much.
Will you?
It's all, yeah. You almost have to deceive yourself, I've found, with this one, which is kind of funny. Hmm. I think we're getting a little too into the deep
Mm.
end.
I
We end up going for another hour if we keep on
Yeah,
this topic,
I think
but
we've
I
covered that
think
quite
your
well.
I think your wheat rant was perfect, and you hit the nail on the head. Everything. You need to have awareness, and you need to believe that things will be better.
I always wonder
And if you're
during those
struggling, hmm,
I always wonder during those rants whether there's actually value in it or whether it's just me ranting and getting um, a bit emotive about something that is emotionally significant to me,
yeah, I know the feeling.
which is why we need
Sometimes
two of us, not just
is
one of us
is the
talking
real
at a
answer.
screen. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Sometimes is the real answer, and you hit that one out of the park. So take some pride in that. The choices that we make every day matter, and they change the entire world. And we don't believe that in the modern world, but we need to. And when it comes to children, whether or not you should have them in such a horrible world, which is the point of this in the beginning, I think, is that comes down to what kind of person you are. And if you don't believe you're good enough to be able to have a positive influence on them, then you shouldn't. But more importantly, what you should take away is that you need to work on yourself no matter who you are. Every human being can be better, and every human being carries problems and trauma from their childhood and their life in general. You need an awareness not just of what you do, but of what you feel. It's not just an awareness of, oh, I did that thing, oh, I lied to that person. It's awareness of, I feel this way in this situation. I suddenly feel very stressed. I suddenly feel like I'm under attack by my partner.
Or there is a feeling of
Why?
stress, not necessarily even
Yes,
I feel
yes,
stressed. It's like disassociating
yes,
yourself
or
from
you're
it so
not
you can look at it.
actually attacked by your partner, but you feel that way. And why is that? And I think that's where we should leave it. And next time we can try and go into,
We keep saying next time we'll say this or talk about this, and then we end up going off on different tangents.
well, I think you were right that we sort of needed to address before we get into, mm,
We'll see what we do.
yeah. Well, like we said when we started the new version of this project, is that we don't know where it's going to go. And we were going to talk about childhood trauma, but then we ended up talking about children and why. Well, we didn't even talk about that much. We ended up on the importance of conscious attention and the choice to do good, which is almost nothing to do with children. Although I would say there's a multiplication effect with kids again. So
Hmm.
come with us on our random journey to some unknown place next week. We'll see what happens.
It'll be
But I think that was a
unexpected and
good
interesting, hopefully.
conversation. Yes. Hopefully we'll discover something else valuable. And with that, I think we should say, good night to everyone, and
Yep.
we'll see you next week.
Yep. See you then. Bye.